I got a Twitter question from someone named Shattered Lightbulb, and I thought it would actually be fun to talk about this here. He wanted to know the discussions around professional wrestling, in his view, are as bad today as they have ever been. It's become so spiteful, petty, and condescending. Why, he wants to know, do you think that is? And I pointed out to him that this is not a new phenomenon. You could say that it's only gotten worse. It's only gotten more toxic, more negative. Some of the comments, you go on YouTube or some places on social media, it's toxic as can be. People have a lot of courage on the internet. Anonymity is a powerful thing. Those people don't have to answer for their comments, so they can be as vile as they want to be. And it's not just a wrestling thing. I've had to stop looking at comments underneath news articles. If you go to a newspaper website or something and you go on in the comments section underneath, you want to see toxic, especially when it comes to politics. This is not just a wrestling thing, I assure you. Even in politics, everything is so partisan and everything is so polarized, one side or the other. It's disgusting. Absolutely just disgusting. So wrestling and wrestling discussion, unfortunately, is not immune to that. But the idea of where did all of this negativity among wrestling fans come from? It's always been there. Going back at least 25 years. With the advent of the internet. People suddenly had a forum to talk with other fans and vent about all the things they didn't like. If you think people complaining about, why is this guy being pushed so hard? Oh, this guy is being buried. If you think that that stuff started in the last 10 years or the last 15 years, guess again. And I told him, I said, you can all do the same thing. I want everybody listening to this to do the exact same thing that I told Shattered Lightbulb. Go to Google Groups and search out old RSPW posts from the 1990s or even the late 1980s. You might find some stuff that way too. Or the 2000s. Type in the letters RSPW and then type in the year and maybe a wrestler name and see what comes up. RSPW is probably the oldest internet wrestling news group, bulletin board, call it whatever you want. I've been able to find posts from as early as 1992. Although I think the group dates back even earlier than that. I think the group may go back to 89 or 90. The internet didn't just start in the mid-1990s. It existed long before that. The World Wide Web and web browsers like Netscape and all that came later on. But before the World Wide Web and .com websites and everything, the internet was still a thing. I mean, a lot of people didn't have a computer. I didn't get my first computer until 1994. And the big thing when I first got online was America Online. It wasn't even just AOL. It was America Online. And you had that horrific dial-up modem noise where it sounded like animals being, just murdered and having their nuts chopped off. And it would make so much noise. So if I tried to log onto the internet late at night, it was impossible for anybody else in the house not to know. It would wake up half the neighborhood. That's how loud this thing was. But the big thing was when WWF at the time got on America Online, they had their own keywords. So before websites, the big thing was AOL keywords, unless you had Prodigy or CompuServe or some other service. And you would have chats and chat rooms and all that kind of stuff. But WWE had their own dedicated keyword area on the AOL service, and you can download, logos and pictures. And I would just wait for the pictures of Sunny. Sunny was the most downloaded woman ever on AOL. And you would download these pictures, and they were all pixelated. And each line of pixels, you would have to sit there and wait for them to load. It was ridiculous. I know I wasn't the only one to do that. So that takes you back to what was going on back then. But this news group dates back even long before that. And it is fascinating to read about what people were thinking and saying in real time. The first members, I guess you would call them, and I hate even using this term, but the first members of the IWC. And there were some other people in there. Dave Scherer was in there. Now he runs PW Insider, which is one of the more reliable websites for wrestling news out there. Rick Shaya or Saya. I never I never remember how to pronounce this guy's name. I think Rick Saya. He used to run a website called Online Onslaught that I used to read and get some of my wrestling news from. Scott Keith. You know, he was in that group. Joel Gertner. Before he became a thing in ECW, he used to post in there back in the mid-90s. And I'm sure other wrestlers did too. But anyway, search around and you will find some fun stuff. I found a post from September of 1995 complaining about Waylon Mercy being jobbed out too much. This person was very upset. Waylon Mercy, he lost to Savio Vega on TV, and why are they jobbing him out? What are they doing to this guy? So I found that. I found a few things. I found a very long thread from February of 1998 talking about the Raw and Nitro ratings. Ratings discussions online even 21 years ago. And this person, the username MDB, said that Nitro scored a 5.1, its highest composite ever. But doesn't it feel like a letdown? They beat Raw by over 1 million people every week, and it's to be expected. I spent 10 minutes digging up the Arn Anderson retirement segment rating. It got a 5.8. What does Nitro have to do to really impress with their ratings now? And shouldn't Raw just move to another day? So Nitro was crushing it in the ratings back then, and this person felt like it was a letdown and that Raw should move to another night. Of course, it was only 2 months later that Raw beat Nitro for the first time in 83 weeks or whatever it was. It's a good thing they didn't take MDB's advice. Even though Raw was getting its ass kicked by Nitro every week, it's important to remember, Raw was still doing its best numbers ever at that time. I'm not sure switching nights would have really been the best idea. Here's a few other fun ones I pulled. September 16th, 1993. Ron wanted to know the real identity of Doink the Clown. Who is this guy? Who is this Doink guy? And the next poster down below said that he saw a wrestling magazine that said that Doink was former WCW wrestler Big Josh, which is true. Big Josh was portrayed by Matt Bourne, who also portrayed Doink the Clown. See, back then we got all of our information from the magazines. I mean, most of the wrestling magazines now are gone. I literally think there's 1 or 2 left. Most of the magazines are gone, which is really sad. But back then, the magazines were the shit. That's where you got a lot of your information from. That, or if you knew about The Torch, if you knew about The Observer, then you were a subscriber. But for me, anyway, back then, it was the magazines, and it was the hotlines, and then, of course, you had websites popped up, and there were a few select ones that you would kind of, get your news from. But it was a lot harder to find news back then, certainly than it would be today. But here's where it gets good. I found this one as well. This had the subject line, WTF, Raw wins, from November 4th, 1998. This person was not happy that Raw beat Nitro in the ratings that week. He said, how is it possible that Raw beat Nitro this week? With Raw giving us the same script it's given us for months, with the same lame-ass Vince McMahon on the microphone, Kane, Undertaker, Steve Austin feud, Rock against Ken Shamrock, WrestleMania Revisited bullshit, and so on. Nitro gave what everyone on RSPW has been scrambling and screaming for: no Hogan, no Bischoff, no Warrior. We get a great lucha match in Rey Mysterio against Psychosis. We get Booker T against Scott Hall, Eddie Guerrero against Saturn with some advancement of the LWO angle. I forgot about the LWO. An excellent Raven versus Dean Malenko match, a great Jericho-Billy Kidman match, and a great setup for Bret Hart against Bill Goldberg. By the way, he says, I think Bret will win World War III, turn on Hogan, and beat Goldberg at Starrcade. I know everyone is predicting Kevin Nash, but it looks to me like the Nash feud with Scott Hall is going to continue through at least the end of '98. Thanks to these ratings now, we're going to be force-fed Hogan and Bischoff on Nitro for the rest of our lives. Good job, guys. Yeah, good job, guys. We got Hogan and Bischoff for the rest of our lives on Nitro. Oh, whoops. Never mind. The more things change, the more they stay the same. people were bitching 20 years ago about the same things that people bitch about today. It's just that with Twitter and Facebook, it is more easily accessible. Wrestling fans have always been miserable. That will never change.